Welcome back. So this class will continue discussing motivation. Last class, we talked about some of the more fundamental drives, and now we'll get into some of the more complex social ones. So we'll talk about sexual motivation and social motivation. So you can consider affiliation to be a fifth F that applies to social animals. So animals like humans and dogs have the drive to be around other members of their species or even other species. And then I'll talk about achievement motivation, which your textbook tries to sell you on pretty hard. And I'll use that to segue into academic motivation. All right. You will recall that Freud believed that there were two fundamental motivational forces. One was eros, the drive for life, which you saw as a sexual drive, as the libido, and thanatos, the instinct for death and destruction. Those are two of the F's. So he was onto something. But Freud also believed that the ego, the conscious self, used defense mechanisms to protect itself from the conflict between these animal impulses and instincts and what is socially acceptable. And he thought that one of these was sublimation. So Freud believed that the basic sexual impulse could be managed in one way by redirecting it or channeling it towards more socially acceptable behaviors or greater cultural goals, like art. Anyone seen this statue? It's just down the road at Dalhousie on Sidley Campus. It's just a few blocks from here. It's called the Marine Venus. It's at Dalhousie University. And you might wonder, well, what was the artist thinking? And you might look at ties. Or are ties, could they be a phallic symbol? What about golf? It's about using a club and balls to get into holes while admiring the undulating landscape. So if you were Freudian, you might relate these things back to one of the F's. It all comes from a very masculine perspective. So we talked about how women tend to be quite choosy maters. So heterosexual women will say no a lot more to men than men would to them. And they seem to select for men's ability to provide, for strength and for social status, to sort of protect and provide. So research in psychology has shown that heterosexual women will rate a picture of a man as more attractive. They're rating the man. They'll rate him as more attractive if he's in a luxury car compared to being in a beat-up car, even though it's the same man. But when the researchers tried that experiment on heterosexual female subjects, and of course, it's probably the university students, the male students did not care which car the female they were looking at. They were not affected by the car. So one might expect that this phenomenon could lead heterosexual men who are baseline more sexually motivated to put in some effort, like maybe working in demanding jobs, right, in order to earn higher pay, to get that nice car, to be able to afford to cover the bill at the expensive restaurant. And these are online comments that I found from straight guys who were disclosing things that they had done to get the attention of a woman. Went as far as going to an arts college just because she was there when not interested in that subject. And one pierced his own nipples very, very painfully in order to satisfy what was sort of a mere whim. But it was effective, according to that story. The first scientist to study human sexuality was Alfred Kinsey. He was actually not a psychologist. He was a biologist. And he founded the first institute for sex research. for sex research. And he had volunteers come into the lab to undergo sex acts so that he could observe and quantify what was going on very systematically, very scientifically. And in your textbook, you will find a rather gratuitous, I think, description of these phases that the body goes through. It starts with elevated heart rate and then it progresses. You've seen it. Okay. So sexual behavior has a lot to do with hormones. And hormones are chemical messengers that your brain uses to affect your organs and your behavior, and especially your long-term behavior. And the most important male sex hormone is testosterone. Okay, and it stimulates the growth of male sex organs during the fetal period, and also masculinizes the brain. So there's an exposure to that hormone in the prenatal environment that matters to psychology later on. And then it also drives the development of male sex characteristics during puberty. And it's associated with sex drive, with dominance, with visuospatial ability. One sex difference that comes up in psychology is that men are better at manipulating 3D objects in their mind. I don't know if you've ever seen an IQ test before, but there's verbal questions, there's numerical questions, and you'll get a bunch of questions that they show you a weird 3D object and ask you which one of it is this one rotated 360 degrees or something like that. And men tend to get higher scores on that. It's easy to say that, yes, there's a correlation between testosterone and aggression, but that's a little bit simplistic. It's more about winning, which is dominance. So if men or women are injected with testosterone before some setup, which is a game that requires friendliness and cooperation in order to win, right? Well, here's what happened in that study. What happened was that the people who got the testosterone, whether they were men or women, were actually friendlier and more cooperative, because that's how you win, or that's how you would win that game. Okay, aggression is just, it's one way to win, and it's a good one, have at the back of your pocket in case everything else goes wrong. Okay, but it's not just about aggression. I think it makes more sense to say that it's about dominance. The major female sex hormone is estrogen, and estradiol is secreted in greater amounts by people of the female sex, and it contributes to those female sex characteristics of the development of the body in a way that's associated with the female sex. And then this hormone sort of cycles along with the reproductive cycle. And in non-human female mammals, estrogen levels peak during ovulation. And then the animal is very, very interested. But it's different in humans. There's a lot more plasticity, a lot more complexity. And it's associated with mood swings. Women do tend to score higher on what the Big Five calls neuroticism, or what the Hexaco personality test calls. They score lower on emotional stability. So the Hexaco flips the scale around. But there is a general trend where women have more emotional ups and downs. And that is mostly the case during the reproductive years. And then that levels off as people of the female sex age. And it really levels off after menopause, when estrogen levels fall back down to the level of, say, a little girl. And the differences between the sexes are greatest during the time when people would be having children and raising children, and level off in like the 50s. So as you may be experiencing now, there can be large changes in these hormones over the lifespan. And one of them is around puberty. And after puberty, a mammal is able to reproduce. And in humans, that's something like what, like maybe 12. It's getting earlier and earlier because we have much better access to nutrition than we did. And then levels of both estrogen and testosterone fall as people age, but much more precipitously for people of the female sex. And sometimes people lose those drives for other reasons, right? There can be drugs that cause shifts that make people lose interest in sex. Surgery can do that too. So get a lot of stress. So these fluctuate over your lifespan, maybe cyclically and as you age. One major way that humans differ from other animals is that we're much less conspicuous about fertility, at least the females are. When a female cat is ovulating, you ever heard that? Yeah, like she lets the whole neighborhood know. And that brings all the tomcats to the yard. We're up to 2 miles away. It's amazing how it works now. And yet, human females don't do that. Why don't we do that? Is there any adaptive value to not doing that?
You want to keep everything private?
Yeah, I want to keep everything private. Okay, but why is that good? You think about the difference between what it takes to raise a human child and what it takes to raise a kitten. I want to hit your computer.
Humans are more selective because it requires more from them biologically to have offspring. So it's not very beneficial to have a pregnancy every time that they ovulate because it would be detrimental.
Yeah. Yeah, there's higher costs is a thing. So higher costs for the woman is a thing, or person of the female sex. Anyone else? Anything about the offspring?
Maybe society made us like women to be more shy and quiet about our libido and all of that. And also like it's hard to be a mother too. So most of the time we're not looking we're not looking to have the baby with whoever we are with.
But when we do want to have one, why not just act like that cat? Human children require a lot of investment. A lot of investment. Like think of the mother cat. She raises her kittens all by herself and they're good to go after what, a few months? I mean, they're not a fully adult cat for about a year, but they don't need their mom for all that time. They definitely need her for the first, like, what, 3 months? So human children benefit a great deal from investment, and yes.
I just wanted to ask, does lifespan kind of have an effect on it? Because
Does lifespan, see, but we never do that.
right, I just mean when you're talking about investment into a child, it's 18 years compared to a couple months.
Yeah.
And even after they're independent, there's still there's codependencies and stuff like that.
Yes, so a lot of investment. Yeah. And what does a lot of investment need? Just one person? What happens to the tomcat after he has done the deed? Does he stick around and help raise the kittens? No, he does not. He's on to the next pecan heat, 2 miles off the other way. Okay, that's the life of a tomcat, roaming around. So paternal investment does matter a lot to human children. And in our very close relatives, the chimpanzees, the males are generally not interested in the females. But if the female chimps go into estrus, which they can do at similar times, then the males sort of go into a frenzy. And that's how they manage things. Okay, but that's not how we manage things sort of socially when we need to work together. One of the things that the males will do is come bearing gifts, like fruit or meat. Meat is the best gift. And they will bear gifts and give them to a receptive female. And female chimps who are receptive throughout their cycle benefit from the extra generosity. They benefit from themselves, and so would the baby chimps. Okay, so overall, the evolutionary function of concealed ovulation is that it keeps the male interested and investing all month long. Okay, and not just for 3 days a month. Another hypothesis is that it makes it harder to tell who the father is, so then multiple men might contribute resources and protection. So there's a number of different theories about this, and remember, you can't really prove these speculation from evolutionary psychology, but they all hinge on one thing, and that's paternal investment, okay? Keeping the male around and interested in contributing resources, either to the woman or the child. But not all men are attracted to women, and not all women are interested in men. The majority of people cross-culturally are heterosexual, but across all cultures, there's a minority that's homosexual or bisexual or have even other orientations beyond those. Generally, men tend to have more rigid patterning, and women tend to be more sort of sexually and also gender fluid. If you know somebody who uses they, them pronouns, very high probability they are of the female sex. So there's part of that male-female dichotomy is rigidity versus fluidity. Sexual behavior is not the same thing as sexual orientation. They're definitely correlated. If you're in a free society and you can do what is authentic for you, then your sexual behavior can match your orientation. But gay people have spent lifetimes pretending to be heterosexual because that's what society demanded. And if you weren't, you get in plenty of trouble, as Oscar Wilde did. He spent some time in prison, whole court case, and destroyed his career. Heterosexual people who are prevented from interacting with the opposite sex, say in prison, might develop homosexual behavior. And some people explore different experiences before they settle into what they like. In psychology, we often ask, is it nature and nurture, and what's the relative contribution of nature versus nurture? Nurture is the biggest contributor to sexual orientation. So research in psychology doesn't support the idea that it's a choice, more that it's hardwired. And we know that from twin studies, from looking at brain anatomy. Behavioral differences can be observed early in life, maybe too soon for it to be social learning, and it tends to run in families. When there have been studies on like brain differences between gay folks and straight folks, people who are gay tend to have brain structures that might be intermediate between what we'd see in a heterosexual woman and a heterosexual man. So it's kind of in the middle, in between kind of a thing. Any role of environment seems restricted to the role of hormones during prenatal brain development. So all fetuses start out basically female, And that Y chromosome doesn't kick in until about the 6th week. And it's possible for that Y chromosome not to be activated for some reason. And then the fetus develops according to the normal female pattern. So masculinization is something that happens to a male fetus, and that affects the development of its sex organs, and it also has an influence on brain development. There is men being homosexual is associated with the number of children that the number of other sons that a mother has had before him. So the more sons that a woman has, the more likely the younger sons are to be homosexual. And that has something, I think it's in your textbook, and they speculate that has something to do with an immune response to the fetus. That may get stronger with each successive pregnancy. So there's no benefit to things like conversion therapy that view orientation as a choice, because it's not. Textbook also talks about pornography, and they take a porn is bad kind of stance. And I went and I thought, I'll look into this. And so I went and explored Google Scholar. And what I found is that the evidence is poor quality and there's mixed results. And this is a politically sensitive subject that people take sides on. And there's evidence of confirmation bias on both sides. Violent porn isn't good, but that limits what we know about violent media in general. Being a sex therapist is a thing, right? You can help people figure out what they want in their relationships and help with sexual issues in relationships, which can be quite important. There are sexual dysfunctions that can impair arousal or functioning. Erectile disorder is common in men and tends to be treated with medication. But there are other things that people can learn about, like different techniques, even techniques to delay ejaculation, that sort of thing. All right, I hope that this plays, but we are now going to learn about a relationship between Nathan and Chase. You guys seen this before? No. All right.
My name is David. I'm 27 years old. And I'm in a serious relationship with Nicole.
Hey, Bailey. That's a man.
Nathaniel is in a committed relationship with a car that he's named Chase. He met Chase in a resale lot about 5 years ago.
That was love at first sight. His body and then his interior and everything just together just seemed to fit. I just felt an instant connection.
Nathaniel's obsession first developed as a teenager when he would build model cars, but he didn't find true love until he met Chase.
I find this part of him most sexy just because of the subtle lines and curves. I'll give him a kiss here. And just kind of caressing down the side.
My initial reaction was I was kind of shocked. It was kind of weird because it was just hard to understand.
Pro golfer who married
Honestly, I don't know why I feel the way I do. But I just absolutely love Chase. We always have such a good time together. He likes a lot of the same music I do. We have a favorite song. It's Can't Fight This Feeling by REO Speedway. I do get a guess how you buy something for your fiance or your wife. And then usually for his birthday, I try to do something special for him too. The favorite date would be going to the lookout area. Just lean against him a little and just be with him mainly. But
But Nathaniel's relationship with Chase goes beyond dates and presents.
We have our times when we get sexual.
Does that feel good? Once a way. Love you, baby.
What we do the most often is I like to lean over his fender and across his hood and do little things like that and kind of press up against him and rub against him like that. One of his more bold positions is for me to be underneath him. He really likes that. It's very special to make love to Chase.
I am worried for my friend because it's not normal and you may have people that don't understand and make fun of you.
Nathaniel's so attached to Chase, he rarely lets anyone else drive him. And never lets Chase out of his sight for more than 24 hours.
There have been times, well, two of them honest, because I wasn't with him at work. His picture's on my desktop, so I see his face all the time. It really bothers me when he gets dinged or scratched. If somewhere we have a Chase, my heart would just stop. I just have to gather myself here. I'm sorry.
I am concerned for Nathaniel emotion wise. I think life would be easier if he did change.
Love you.
Nathaniel's roommate Kim is one of the few people who know the full extent of his love life.
I guess the reason I don't tell a lot of people is because I don't know the response I'm going to get. I always worry about that little bit of disgust that somebody may have.
But Nathaniel's biggest fear is how his relationship could affect his career as a customer service technician.
I mean, everybody found out, I'd be worried that it may affect my job. But I love him to death. I wouldn't trade him for the world.
All right, baby. Love you.
So, given your knowledge of psychology, what's going on there?
It's just one-sided. She doesn't kiss him back.
But is it one-sided in Nathaniel's mind? I think in Nathaniel's mind, Chase is totally kissing back.
That's weird.
Yeah. Is there anything that's kind of normal about the instincts that Nathaniel has? Yes.
I think it's mildly different just because it's like literally an inanimate object. But it's like when you're younger and you have like an attraction towards like a TV character, even though in your mind, you know that it's not real, you're still like, well, you know, I like this person and like you, whatever, imagine scenarios. But
Yeah, some people fall in love with characters, even cartoon characters.
but he would just made up a character for his car. So I feel like it's similar in that regard.
Yeah, there's human brains have a tendency towards personification, and you probably encountered that when you were a child and you had a stuffy you loved. You had a name for it and a character for it, and you feel upset if it was hurt and you try to take care of it, but really the doll or the stuffy is an inanimate object. It doesn't seem to like totally get that. Like we kind of get that the stuffy isn't real. He has a lot of instincts that are sort of common, like he wants to protect Chase. He wants to bring him gifts. He wants to sort of take care of him when he's having a bad day. Those are all like sort of normal motivations or instincts that are getting applied to a car. Is Nathaniel gay? Yes.
I mean, I assume because he refers to the car as he calls him Chase.
So weirdly, he's like, I love these cars.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I will bring me gifts and take care of you. He's almost like treating him a way that like that's like classic masculine way to treat.
Yeah, that is
a
true.
woman. So
I don't know why I got that.
next
feeling
one,
too.
next to you, one behind you.
Like I don't know, like, does he need therapy or like do you just leave him like
Excellent question. Does he
Like, is it
need
normal?
therapy? Yeah.
Like what type of therapy or?
Oh, kind of convert him to humans when he's good point. Yeah, he's patterned to like cars and he's always like them. There's one go behind you and then we'll jump over.
I was just gonna say that I feel like the way that you treat someone in a relationship doesn't define their gender. It doesn't necessarily mean he's gay that he refers to his car with he him pronouns, but it's more of a characteristic that he might be as opposed to being straight.
Yeah. I would say to be gay, you have to be a man that likes another man, and the car is an object.
Yeah.
It's sort of in his head that the car is male. So yeah. Spencer, can you throw it across the aisle? I was gonna throw it. The same thing. Oh, okay. Oops. Do you have a question? Wish me luck. It is $1,000 microphone.
In this, I mean, you know, in a situation like that, where you're projecting characteristics onto the vehicle,
Very good. That's what he's doing. He's projecting all kinds of beliefs onto it.
so he can get very creative and he can project all his preferences, whatever he wants, into this object of his desire. And you know, as a car, yeah, the car would definitely won't cheat on him, you know.
No. Probably here.
And you know, a car has many holes, so he can do a myriad of things.
The car can be the perfect partner. And there's one guy, I was reading about one guy who had these like sex dolls. He thought he had a relationship with them. Okay, did whatever he wanted. Down here. Sorry? Yeah, so I've noticed that what happens in these cases is that there's like there's usually like one main car and then there's there's one main doll and there's like 5 other dolls.
Okay, so what is,
There's a question here.
so what is his sexuality then?
So he has what's called a paraphilia, when you have sexual attraction to objects. It's kind of like the sexual version of pica, where you want to eat things that are food.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so there was an excellent question. Does Chase need therapy and would it be conversion therapy? Oh, I love that question. So what are they saying could be wrong? They're worried about, oh, people might make fun of him and he might lose his job. So let's see what does the psychotherapist do? And I don't know if this is like a registered psychotherapist. It's funny how he talks about being afraid that people will find out, but like 11 million people have watched this.
Yeah. So how does it feel when other people ride in Chase with you? I'm just always thinking, in my mind, I hope they don't do anything to hurt him. For Nathaniel, but the biggest negative is going to be rejection and social stigma. We worry that he's going to lose friends, he's going to lose a support network, that he could even lose his job because he's socially not accepted. Have you ever had a girlfriend or a boyfriend?
I've had girlfriends in the past, yeah, and it's always been hard. It's never worked out, I guess, because of that piece of me is still attached to the cars.
You live in a kind of small town.
Yeah.
You know, how would it feel? What would it do to your emotions, to your state of mind to become that car guy, the crazy car guy, the guy who's in love with this car? Do you think it would depress you? Would you be okay with it?
I haven't really thought about it, honestly. Like I said, just kind of keeping it a secret and hoping that no one finds out.
Do you feel like Chase cares about you?
I do feel that from him. It's just the little things that he can do that I can feel him, I guess. Just if he's having a bad day, I can tell in his performance and, you know, and just I can kind of feel vibes, I guess, coming from him. And it's just, yeah.
So, what's the harm? Is it right if he lost his job over that? Should he lose his job over that? Should he be socially ostracized for this socially unacceptable behavior?
I don't think they should like single him out and like try to make him feel bad, because obviously it's not normal, but like he's obviously sick. So I think instead of like trying to like ostracize him or whatever, they should like try and get him help.
But what help? Will it be conversion therapy?
I don't know, but like not, I don't think it should be like help that's like, this is wrong, you can't do this. It should be like, okay, why do you feel like this? And how can we try and get you to like actual people, not cars?
Probably won't happen. Been attracted to cars and planes and bicycles since he was since puberty. Is he on there? Who? Where? Sorry, sometimes I don't look behind me.
I don't think I mean, obviously it's not normal, but he's not really harming himself or anybody by being in love with his car. So I don't necessarily think that he's per se sick. I think obviously it's not normal, but
It's a little delusional.
Exactly.
Like he thinks that the
Yeah.
car is
yeah,
having a bad day and trying to communicate with them, but normal people believe a lot of delusional things.
yeah.
Like,
And if he doesn't really want the help, why push it on him? Because like,
probably wouldn't work.
exactly, he's not going to take the advice.
So you were onto something important there, which is that it's not doing anyone any harm. So no, it's a bit shocking. Maybe as long as he keeps it in the garage, not too much of a problem. Don't do it in the parking lot at work. But that's the same thing for heterosexual couples. So what Nathan has is called a paraphilia, and it's a sexual attraction to non-human objects, or to the suffering of self or others, or to non-consenting persons. Most people with paraphilias are male. The most common paraphilia is the foot fetish, and they're not a problem unless they cause harm. If your paraphilia is for a child, and like Nathan, you believe that the child really has amorous desires for you and is in love with you, you might do things that really hurt the child. So pedophiles believe that the child like loves them and wants them, and that they're having a relationship. So they have that same kind of belief, but instead of it being about a car, it's about a child. And so that can do harm to a real person. Okay, sorry.
Are you sure? Like, is that what pedophilia is? Like,
Yeah.
like, do they really
They're sort of
believe?
childlike,
Do they
and
really believe that the kid is into them?
just like Nathan and believes that Chase is into him.
But like, if you do something to a kid, he's gonna shout, scream, something. Not all the time, but
Yeah, they have ways of, I mean, they usually.
if the
go
kid is
for, like,
screaming and like it's not
they have ways of
consenting,
grooming children and kind of getting them into things. They have their techniques, but there's a level of self-delusion.
okay.
I'm sure. Yeah. And then there are people that are just sadistically awful, like what's his name? Ricky Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who was just being as evil as he could just to be evil.
Okay, the thing is that I've actually met a couple pedophiles in my life. I know it's awful. But the thing is that they actually groom. They do all that grooming stuff to like get your attention. And you think that they're friends sometimes. And they can do something really friendly, like you're trying to grab something and you cannot get it, and they help you with that. And the next time they do the same and the same. So by the end of the day, you say hello and you start a conversation. So they get that starting a conversation with them to get to do something with you.
And they tend to go for older children who are into or approaching puberty.
Yes.
I mean, there are people that go for, 5-year-olds, but like there's a different word for when somebody might be 12. I can't remember what it's. Pederasty. So sometimes they're pederasts. And that was seen as socially acceptable in ancient Greece. It was practically part of their educational system. The most common is the foot fetish. And when we learn about the brain and the sensory and motor cortices, you'll see that there's the parts in the somatosensory cortex that responds to feet and to the genitals are right next to each other. And maybe that has something to do with it. Foot fetishes are less problematic than, like pedophilia or perhaps objectophilia. Well, no, objectophilia doesn't hurt the objects at all, but definitely less harmful than something like pedophilia or necrophilia. That's another one. The issue, foot fetishes can be a relationship issue when the partner is just totally all about the feet. And the person attached to the foot feels like they don't matter. And it's just sort of all foot worship. So that can cause relationship issues. So if you like feet, remember they come attached to a person who wants to be included too. All right. So consent matters when we talk about harm. And people have to be able to understand what they're consenting to in order to provide consent. So that's why drunk people and children can't consent. But then what about people with intellectual disabilities? Can they consent? This is a very controversial issue. Way at the back. Hello, I'm not taking this risk.
I do think that they could consent. Sometimes, well, I feel like to an extent, if they could understand, if both of them have their own perception of their consent, like let's say how in the photos they're getting married. If they understand that what comes with the responsibilities and that they actually love each other and what their perception of love, because their perception of love and our perception of love could be two completely different things. And as long as they understand that, I feel like that's fine.
Yeah, it's a tough one and a controversial one because you're combining this matter of consent also with ableism. So sometimes we see people with disabilities in a submissive role and treat them like children. And we see children as not having sexual impulses, as sexual relationships not being appropriate for children. But people with disabilities are adults and they have adult instincts and drives. And so that can be difficult. It's seen as much more socially acceptable for male people with disabilities to have sexual relationships. And then people, thank you, are tend to be much less accepting of female people with disabilities having sexual relationships. And they may undergo, say, involuntary sterilization even. Okay. So there could be a role for psychologists there with because there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of vulnerability. There are some very happy marriages, but there are also cases of sexual abuse. They may need education on contraception and support if they have children, support for self-advocacy. Sometimes their children get taken away by social services, even if they're taking excellent care of them. I saw a hand.
What would you say about like two people getting married and physically they're the same age, but one of them is like mentally challenged and is like 6-year-old mentally?
Oh, like can there be a relationship between an able-minded person?
Yeah, I mean, there something like that happened recently.
And we might wonder, is the person with a disability consenting? The first thing I'd be concerned about is there a power relationship? So did I talk to you guys about facilitated communication in pseudoscience? No, I talked about that in my other intro psych class. At one point, there was a treatment for autism where the scientists believe that autism is really a motor disorder, not a communication disorder. And the person with autism needed help with somebody guiding their hands so that they could type. And it was just this amazing treatment because these autistic people who couldn't communicate before are now able to do all the homework that the mainstream kids in the mainstream classroom can do. And now they can apply to go to university. And what did they find? well, there was research on it where so what they would do is, let's say, show the picture of a cat, and you ask the autistic person who's nonverbal, who has this facilitator, to help them identify it, and the person types cat. Well, now, what if you actually use a screen and they can see different things, and you show the autistic person a picture of a cat, and you show the facilitator a picture of a dog? Guess what the autistic person types with the help of the facilitator? They type dog. And that's how they found out that facilitated communication didn't really work. It was actually the facilitator believing in good faith that they were helping this person communicate, but actually doing the communication for them. And thank you. And there are a lot of ugly cases with that where the person with autism seems to be making accusations of abuse and sexual abuse against their parents that turn out to be false.
With people with autism, they often like hyperfixate on one specific thing and are usually really interested or really good at something in specific.
Yeah.
So with that, how does that kind of play in, like, how they can be super, super smart in one specific area of something and then struggle with other things like that?
Yes, I will come to that. I'll go back to the facilitated communication bit. One of the many, many issues with facilitated communication is that it was used for people with disabilities to provide consent to have sexual relationships with the facilitator. So the facilitator would type yes for them. That's a problem. There's a power relationship there. So the first thing I look for is there a power relationship? If there's no power relationship at all, then I'm much more open to it. And now your question was about, I think it goes back to brain development, but yes, they are tremendous. They can be tremendously talented at something. They're people who have generally low IQ. This is different from autism, but who can have an incredible memory, such that they just see something once, like from a helicopter, and then they can like draw the city they saw. So it is possible to have some kind of difference in brain development, or to have, it's possible to have generally low cognitive ability, but just to have a knockout skill in one particular area. That can happen, and it does happen.
No,
and it's not just in autism that it happens.
Could that possibly like play into the whole like love factor? Because I knew a lady who she was super into like hockey and hockey players of like our hometown hockey team, like obsessed with it, and thought that she was like in love and dating one of the hockey players on the team, who replied to one of her messages once on like Instagram or something.
Yeah.
And she actually had this like boyfriend of like 2 weeks who was actually younger brothers of one of the players.
Yeah.
And she thought that she was in love with him. And would that be because he kind of had that connection to the hockey player? Like, could they be?
She sounds a bit like, this sounds like a bit like delusional disorder.
Maybe, but like,
was she kind of with it generally? Otherwise, she had her life together. She just had this one.
She has
idea.
She has disabilities,
so she's not like generally.
She has autism and a couple of other things as well.
Okay.
Like, could
there
specific
could be
things like that be linked to what they think that love is?
I don't know. But the brain is so complex that here's a metaphor for you. If everything we wanted to know about the human brain was a mile, then we know about like 2 inches of it. Like there's so much that we don't know that I can't really even answer the question. But there's a few things going on when we're talking about fixations, we're talking about abilities, we're talking about delusions, and sometimes we're talking about personification. Okay, I'm going to move on to affiliation. How are we doing for time? 150. So humans are social animals, and we have a primal need to belong to a group, right? We survive together as a group. Overwhelmingly, we don't have the ability to go live out there in the woods on our own. There are people who do that. They're called survivalists. It's really hard to do. You can't do it for very long. And even if you found the means to survive, like if you were just alone forever, probably pretty miserable or lose your mind. So our fifth F is for affiliation. And feelings of love and acceptance activate your brain's reward system in the way that food does. Okay? And the experience of social exclusion is registered in your brain's pain center. So, and social isolation increases the risk of poor mental and physical health. So I'll buy that that's a need, a legitimate need. Social exclusion has been used as punishment for a long time because it hurts so much. That's called ostracism. Okay? And it results in real pain. It's not physical pain, but it's registered in your cingulate cortex, which also processes physical pain. And so, acetaminophen, Tylenol, which we usually take for physical pain, also works on social pain. And it has strong effects on people. It can interfere with empathy for others. It can reduce performance, increase aggression, disagreeableness. They say that like it's a bad thing, and encourage self-defeating behavior. So it is used as a form of punishment to sort of control behavior. And in the case of, like, say, social bullying, sometimes a person isn't even being punished for having done anything wrong at all. Right? Sometimes we do this to people in ways that are just completely unjust. And in that case, it's because the experience of power is rewarding. I'll come back to that in a moment.
If people are using medication to take pain away, couldn't that be like a gateway to start using drugs? Like, wouldn't that be a bad? I'm just thinking, especially if you're giving like a younger person who's already like socially being unaccepted by their peers, like medication to feel better, maybe could that like later on in their life be like they could start using harder medication
because you're teaching somebody that you can solve a problem with pills, right?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any research on it. I am aware of research on alcohol and marijuana that show that they can be gateway drugs because they make you feel more willing, less inhibited to try other drugs. So in the case of bullying, it's not used as any kind of just punishment, like, I don't know, sending you to your room or putting you in timeout is. So the people who perpetrate that are demonstrating their power and their position in a social hierarchy, right? In the pecking order, they're demonstrating they can peck and that somebody can get pecked. And that feeling of having social status, of having power can also be rewarding. So sometimes we do that to each other for reasons that are quite unjust. Textbook gets into social networking. Online social networking is a relatively new human behavior. This has not been around for very long at all. And we're still trying to understand the effects of it. And there's pros and cons. When I was your age, the Facebook came out. I don't know if anyone even uses that anymore. Is this still a thing? Yeah, kind of. People who spend more time online spend less time face-to-face with friends, obviously. Lonely people spend more time online. Social networkers are less likely to know their real-world neighbors. But it can strengthen connections with people who you already know. If you're a member of a minority group, it's an easy way to find other people like you, right? To find your people. Does it stimulate healthy self-disclosure? When people make self-disclosures, like on a Facebook wall, they tend to be sort of kind of talking to themselves in front of some mysterious audience. It's not quite the same thing as having a face-to-face conversation where you might be focused on the needs and perspectives of the other person. So you lose that sense of context and of how people are receiving something. Self-disclosure is important in friendships and in relationships. It deepens them. But online communication it's less focused on how other people received it, or even not focused on it. And it's less self-aware, less inhibited. There's something called facilitated disinhibition. There was one study where they randomly assigned students to be in a face-to-face encounter group or a online encounter group, and they counted the number of times that there was anything kind of like harassing, sexually inappropriate, and if the prevalence was 0 in that study for the face-to-face encounters between students. But then in the online encounters, can't remember what it was, maybe something like 30%, but there was a pretty big difference. People will say things in a chat that they won't say otherwise. Now, when you can see people's facial expressions, eye contact, that kind of thing. Do profiles and posts reflect people's actual personalities? Research suggests that it does do so pretty well. So, maybe extroverts post a lot and introverts post less. It does seem to promote narcissism. So if you get people experimentally to spend time like editing pictures of themselves to post on social media, and then give them some test that measures narcissistic traits, they'll score higher than people who did some control tasks because it's self-focused. But then, this stuff wasn't around when I was your age, and I'm grateful for things like Reddit and for where people have a voice. In the past, it just kind of didn't. There are a lot more dominant narratives of establishments that people would just believe. There used to be like, I don't know, 5 newspapers, and what you would read was what was printed there. And now, Google is this amazing gateway to so many different voices that you'd never hear before. It's a lot easier to find perspectives that are, from the trenches. I'd say that one of the best educational tools for me in learning about eating disorders was just reading posts on My Pro Ana. I learned things from doing that I would have never learned from a textbook or a class, because it was the people with the condition speaking for themselves, right? Not having someone else speak for them and interpret them and then present. Okay, it was like, so I think that's pretty cool. The text tries hard to sell you on achievement motivation. Academia is a relatively class privileged environment, and it has values that reflect the values of the, middle and upper middle class cultures. And those values are aspiration, achievement, becoming, self-actualizing. Sometimes students from working class backgrounds talk about feeling like a fish out of water in this kind of environment. And they might have different values that are more about, say, authenticity, character, community, work ethic. But this microcosm, this textbook, these textbook authors are coming from that class privileged environment. And there you can hear those values of achievement, right? But we're all motivated to set goals and work towards accomplishments. And sometimes those are personal goals that are just about pleasing ourselves, right? You might be intrinsically motivated to achieve something. When you want something and that desire comes from inside yourself, and it's autonomous, and that's intrinsic motivation. But if you want to do something because you'll get some reward for it, we call that extrinsic motivation. And if you do something that's because you think you should do it, then that's called, I think it's introjective motivation. And I was talking about that last class. And there's always a social context to goals, right? Even personal ones. So sometimes we set goals that are about helping other people, right? Or pleasing or impressing other people. The textbook promotes this pop psychology concept of grit. And I think it's an interesting example of bias, because we started out this class learning about the different kinds of biases and how psychologists need to be aware of them because they're also subject to them. Grit, this idea of having passion and perseverance towards achieving long-term goals, right? You will achieve your goal because of your passion and because of your perseverance. It's a problematic construct. It's not scientifically validated, but it has a lot of appeal, and especially to people with individualistic kind of class privilege values that are about achievement and accomplishment and self-determination. It's like throw everything in to achieving your dream. Like that way of thinking. Okay, it makes everything about passion and willpower. It's very individualistic. Like, you know, you're the one who matters, and it's about doing what you want and self-actualizing. And that's kind of their idea of what it means to live the good life, being gritty in the pursuit of your desires. And I think this idea is, I imagine it's in there. I speculate that it's in there because it's compatible with the values of academic culture, more so than that it's a good construct. It's a circular idea. So grit is a trait that's assigned after the fact. You achieved this difficult goal, so you must have persevered in order to have achieved it. You must have been passionate about it. And then the opposite of that could be, well, you know, the fact that you couldn't keep practicing shows that you don't have enough willpower, and that explains why you couldn't keep practicing. Right? They're just circular ideas. They don't have good explanatory or predictive power. And it downplays or ignores issues of privilege, like maybe there's all kinds of people that are willing to support you to achieve your goals versus, say, discrimination. And some people get undermined. Some people face barriers in the environment where, you know, they have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Okay. So some people aren't supported to self-actualize. I'm not a fan of this grit thing. The pleasure of achievement is mediated by dopamine. Right? That's the neurotransmitter that's responsible for feelings of reward, of success, of greatness, even of grandiosity. So people who have too much dopamine might have schizophrenia. So that's part of the causes of the active positive symptoms of schizophrenia, where people have grandiose delusions and they think they're God, that kind of thing. Is too much dopamine on board. And one way that many professionals chase that feeling of success, of living the great life, of being your best self, is by using a dopamine agonist called cocaine. It can also make people act quite grandiose. So there's a part of your forebrain there are forebrain structures called the basal ganglia, and they're involved in controlling movement. When there's damage, you can see Parkinson's disease, and it also contains these dopaminergic neurons. And the idea is that it allows you to perform movements, like intentional movements, that obtain some reward, like pushing the lever, you're the rat, and then you get the pellet, and then you get that dopamine hit from doing that. And so we do it again, 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 again. And rats who push a lever to stimulate this part of the brain will just go nuts on it. So that's the neurotransmitter system that would be underlying this. Your textbook gives you some research-based strategies for achieving goals. So if you do have a goal, it's good to have a clear resolution that you announce to friends or family. You're more likely to come through on a goal if you tell other people about it versus if you keep it to yourself. Because then you have to manage their expectations of you as well. Important to have a good plan for how you're going to achieve that goal. To monitor and record your progress and to do it in a supportive environment. If you can find one, you can make one. Habits are also very powerful because most of our brain isn't doing conscious processing. Right? You're only conscious of a very small proportion of all the incoming stimuli. And you have an unconscious mind. So you do a lot of things on autopilot. Sometimes you might drive somewhere and not remember how you got there. Okay. And so if you can develop good habits, then you're leveraging that power of your unconscious, power of the automatic. And you don't create a new habit immediately. There was a study on this where people set goals like, oh, I want to start drinking water. And the researchers counted how many times people had to try until it became a habit, which I think was defined as keeping it up for something like 6 weeks. I can't quite remember. Anyway, there was a range, a very big range of 18 to 254 days. And the average across all these different behaviors, none of which might even interest you or be relevant to your one goal, was 66 repetitions. So challenging to interpret that, but I think the take-home point is that if you want to develop a new habit, you're not going to do it immediately just by wanting to. You're going to have to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail. And if it's 18 times, you're doing really well. Okay, don't feel bad if it's 66 times. And then the book said to persevere, and I changed that. So I was like, how about that? I'm going to say be adaptable. And I'll agree that you'll encounter, numerous barriers and obstacles. But when you do that, you can use your resources to respond adaptively. I think it makes more sense that it's healthier to promote adaptability over persistence. Yes, they said be persistent. And I don't see the wisdom of persisting or persevering no matter what, for the sake of persisting and persevering. Like, I don't see that as necessarily heroic. That might not be prudent. Sometimes you need to adjust your goals, even many times. So adaptability is the human superpower, and psychologically, it's your readiness to find your resources, know your resources, and use them to act in a way that gets you where you're trying to go. You also need to know where you're going, which is a whole other problem. Good goals that reflect like adaptive goal setting methods are SMART goals. And then goals that reflect maladaptive goal setting processes are vapid goals. So a SMART goal is specific, right? You need to be specific about what you're trying to achieve so that you know when you've achieved it. And one thing people will do a lot is that they'll change the definition of the goal as they go along. So this also helps you know how to get started. You need a measurable goal so that you know when it's been achieved and how far along the path you are to achieving it. Gentlemen, thank you. The goal has to be achievable or actionable. Is there anything you can do? Any action you can take to actually achieve this? Sometimes people have goals that aren't actionable. Those might be called dreams. They need to be realistic. Sometimes the artists used to say relevant, like it has to matter to you. If they're unrealistic, you'll feel overwhelmed and unnecessarily stressed and frustrated. And then good goals are time bound. So give your sense of, decide when you're going to achieve this by. So let's say I want to start drinking water. You might want to be doing that habitually by, I don't know, December. No, it's probably too late. Maybe something like 3 months is a good time frame, but you need a time frame. Badly set goals are vapid goals. They're vague. That way the target is unclear and the path is unclear. All the more to frustrate yourself. They're amorphous. The target is shifty, so you never know when you've actually achieved it. They're pie in the sky, impossible dreams that overestimate your capacity. So they feel bad about yourself. Okay, they're way too big to achieve. And they're delayed, right? There's no time frame for completion. You know, sometime, when you're confident, when circumstances are right. There's an argument that your psychological sense of success comes from setting and achieving personally meaningful goals, ones that resonate with your values. And I would say that reflects the sort of class privileged academic worldview. There are other people that say, no, that's not what your sense of success comes from. But let's go with this for now. And they would say that your identity develops as you try things and explore, develop a sense of mastery. And so your goals and your goal setting will develop as you develop. But the idea is that you take small sequential steps. You fail, pick yourself up, and try again. So this brings me to academic motivation, which is the cause of behaviors related to academic functioning and success. How much effort you put in, right? How effectively you regulate your work. I have been in academia for, I don't know, 15, 16 years now, and I have just learned the skill of like breaking up reading a chapter into like 10 pages a day instead of cramming in several chapters all at once. So I'm like still cramming this far in. I'm gonna guess you guys are probably cramming too. Breaking it up is much more effective as a way to read, but it took me 15 years. And it lies behind what endeavors you choose to pursue. Why are you majoring in this and not something else? And how persistent you are when faced with an obstacle. I don't believe that being persistent is necessarily always good. It's a skill, persistence is a skill, and there's a way to use each skill adaptively. So I asked you guys why, and Diana provided a qualitative analysis of what she shared on your assignments. So a lot of people were interested, may have taken a psych course before and wanted to learn more. We knew other people who said it was a good course. Chances are they might have been talking about another course because there's like 5 sections of intro psychology and they might not have meant this one at all. Just required for the program or fits a schedule. And some of you folks wanted to pursue graduate school or career in psychology. Generally speaking, more education, more formal education means a better paying job. But, and some of the jobs that you get in entry-level jobs are the most common jobs in Canada, right? So the single most common job in Canada is retail salesperson. Let's say working in a mall, holding clothes. So think twice about compromising your grades because you're spending too much time at one of those jobs. Though I understand that many of you actually do have to juggle work and school, and I do respect that. So generally speaking, more education means better paying job and more authority and self-determination, so you don't have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. Keep in mind that there is a matter of return on investment. So some degrees provide a large return on investment. Say engineering is probably one of the biggest. And some provide psychology, I'm afraid, is pretty flat. Okay. And then some degrees provide a negative return on investment. So you might be paying off, let's say, I think visual arts had one of the lowest, had the most negative return on investment in the study I was looking at. Okay, so that is something to think about because education is expensive. So you might want to think about, the job that you get at the end of it, because some jobs don't require a university degree. And in some cases, you're better served by going out into the market. So if you're interested in acting, probably serves you better to just get out there and act than to take 4 years out of the industry getting a Bachelor of Arts in Theater, unless you want to be a theater pro. These were your grade goals. Most people were shooting for a grade in the B range. And I think we're on track to that because I'm seeing averages that are like high C's or B minus. Combine the kind of 65 average with the assignments, that will land you somewhere in the B range. So I think you guys were on track. I asked why you selected that goal. And Diana said that it was very interesting to read those results because it showcased your motivation. So I don't love self-worth. I would encourage you not to associate your grades with your self-worth. You'll probably get better grades if you don't, in fact. One part of the assignment that showed the most variation in quality was in the plans. Okay, and so historically, students who don't achieve their goals have really like vague plans, like have a calendar and a planner. So well, what are you going to do with it? So this is an example of like a really good, this is a good plan where what this person's doing is envisioning it. And so that was probably one of the things that people struggled more with, right? Having something that you can really envision yourself doing. That makes it so much easier to do. All right, we are just at 2:15 p.m. and I'll end there. You remember that you have a quiz on Sunday, and our next unit's on emotions and stress. You'll find the readings in the syllabus, and I'll stop recording here.